The message came in when the house was already dark and quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear the refrigerator cycle on. We have to cancel tomorrow. Brianna is devastated about the Sephora deal falling through. We need to hold space for her right now. Please understand. It was 11:53 p.m., less than a day before my birthday party, a party I had paid for myself. I read it once, then again. I didn't call. I didn't argue. I didn't even sit down. I just stood by the kitchen window and watched the driveway lights reflect off the empty pavement, like they were waiting for something to arrive. On the counter beside me was a thin manila envelope I had picked up earlier that week, addressed to me in a plain printed label. I hadn't opened it yet. I planned to after the party, when the day was finally mine. Instead, I put my phone face down. The next morning, I would watch a catering van back out of our driveway, and I would feel something in me shift so cleanly, it scared me. But that night, I stayed quiet, staring at the glass, listening to the faint hum of the air system, and wondering how a person can lose so much without anyone raising their voice. I didn't know yet what I would find when I opened that envelope, or why it would matter. I just knew the party was gone, and something else was beginning. So if you have ever had a big moment swallowed by someone else's crisis, you probably already understand the feeling I had in my chest right then. Not anger, not even sadness, more like a door closing, very softly. And once it closes, you do not hear it again. We lived in Highland Park, Dallas, in a house that looked perfect in photos and felt staged in real life. The front rooms stayed cold, like they were waiting for guests who never really came. Everything had a place, and most of the time, I felt like I didn't. My parents, Mark and Elaine, didn't really raise kids. They managed an image. They cared about what people said, what people assumed, what people posted. Brianna, my older sister, was 27 and treated like a project with unlimited funding. She called herself a lifestyle creator. She had a ring light permanently set up in the breakfast nook and a tripod that lived beside the pantry like it belonged there. If the Wi-Fi slowed down, it was an emergency. I was Hannah. I was 18, turning 19, and I was the one who kept the house running without anyone needing to notice. I didn't have a dramatic origin story. Nobody hit me. Nobody screamed daily. That's part of what made it confusing for a long time. Everything looked fine from the outside, and inside the expectations were quiet but constant. By 14, I was the one tracking bills because my dad would forget and then act surprised when something got shut off. I created the spreadsheet, set up autopay, wrote down which card to use for which account, and kept it all moving. By 15, I was the one reminding my mom about dinners, charity meetings, hair appointments, birthdays, and the kind of things she said she loved doing but never seemed to remember on her own. By 16, I was the one proofreading Brianna's emails, fixing captions before she posted, and cleaning up after her whenever she burned a bridge with a brand or a friend. She could make a mess in one sentence and then go take a bath like it wasn't her problem. I learned early that if I handled things before they became visible, the day stayed calm. Calm meant everyone was fine. Fine meant nobody looked too closely at me. The money split in our house was simple. Brianna received a monthly allowance of $6,000 for upkeep. That was the phrase my mother used, like my sister was a property they needed to maintain. Clothes, treatments, trips, meals that were photographed more than eaten. Whatever she wanted, it was framed as part of her future. I received nothing. I worked evenings and weekends doing virtual assistant work for a small real estate office. I saved tips, skipped things, bought my own textbooks. When I asked for help with tuition, my dad told me, calmly, that struggle builds character. When Brianna decided she needed her bedroom redone because it didn't match her brand anymore, my parents spent money like it was a form of love. New furniture, new lighting, custom shelving for handbags. My mother called it an investment. It took me a long time to understand why I didn't fight it. From the outside, people might assume I stayed because I was nice, or shy, or overly responsible. The truth was simpler. I stayed because the system rewarded me when I disappeared into usefulness. Later, I learned there was a name for it: the fawn response. When love feels conditional, you start performing safety. You become agreeable, helpful, low maintenance. You anticipate needs before they become demands. You keep the temperature of the room stable because you think stability is what keeps you included. So I learned to be the person nobody had to worry about. I also learned that in our house, milestones only mattered if they benefited the family story. I was valedictorian. Not because I was trying to prove something, it was just the one place I had control. School had rules. Work showed results. Effort mattered. At home, effort disappeared into expectation. I didn't ask my parents for a party. I didn't want the debt of owing them. I wanted one clean day, with no strings. So I planned it myself. I booked a small caterer 6 months in advance. Nothing extravagant, just good food and a simple setup. I rented chairs, ordered a cake from a bakery I liked, and invited a handful of friends, a couple teachers, and my guidance counselor who had helped me apply for scholarships. It was going to be quiet. It was going to be mine. And then, the night before, my mother sent that text. I stood at the window with my phone in my hand and watched my own reflection in the glass. My face looked calm, but my eyes didn't. I read the message again, slowly, as if reading it carefully would reveal a different meaning. It didn't. I set the phone down, still face down, and I stayed right there, listening to the house breathe around me, letting the silence do what it always did. Then I waited. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. For a few seconds, I had that blank, weightless feeling where you don't remember what day it is. Then the message came back to me, sharp and clean, like cold water. I got out of bed and walked into the hallway. The carpet was soft under my feet. The air smelled faintly like the citrus cleaner our housekeeper used, even though she only came twice a week. Everything looked the same, which was almost the worst part. In the kitchen, the card was already on the counter. My mom must have left it sometime during the night, like dropping something into a mailbox. It was one of those generic cards with gold letters and a blank inside. A $50 bill sat in the crease. No note, no sentence, just the cash, folded small, like an afterthought. I stared at it for a moment, then slid it into my wallet with the rest of my saved cash. I didn't do it out of gratitude. I did it the way you pick up a receipt. You don't argue with it. You just file it away. Upstairs, I heard Brianna moving around. Her door shut and opened again, then shut harder. Cabinets in her bathroom. A hairdryer. She was already performing distress. My mother's voice floated up the stairs for a second, soft and urgent. "Sweetheart, breathe. We're going to get you grounded." That's what they said when Brianna was upset. They didn't say, "What happened?" or "What part did you play?" They said, "We're going to get you grounded," like she was a shaken snow globe and they were the careful hands. My dad came into the kitchen in gym shorts and a polo, holding his phone like it had personally offended him. "Wi-Fi seems slow," he said, not really looking at me. "It's fine," I said. He grunted and opened the fridge. He was the kind of person who always acted like something was just barely functioning, even when the thing in question was a house, a family, a life he didn't personally manage. My mom appeared a few minutes later, already dressed, perfume on, hair done. She had the same expression she used when she was late for something but wanted you to believe she had chosen that timeline on purpose. "Hannah," she said, like she was checking a box. "Happy birthday." "Thanks." She moved past me to the coffee machine. No hug, no eye contact longer than a second. "We're taking Brianna out for the day," she said, stirring a spoon in a mug. "She really needs support right now." I nodded once. My dad didn't say anything at all about my birthday. He was scrolling, thumb moving fast. It would have been easier if they had been openly cruel. If they had said, "We don't care." If they had insulted me. At least then there would have been something to push against. But that wasn't their style. Their specialty was making you feel unreasonable for wanting anything. If I had argued, it would have become a conversation about me being insensitive, about Brianna's mental health, about how families show up for each other. They would have used all the right words, with none of the right meaning. I had learned that lesson a long time ago. When I was 13, I won a district award for academic writing. The ceremony was on a Thursday night. My mom said she would come. She promised. Then Brianna had a panic attack because a boy hadn't replied to her message. My mom stayed home with her. She told me afterward that she was sorry, but Brianna needed her more. When I was 15, I had a state competition. My dad said he'd drive me. Then he got invited to a last-minute work dinner and told me to take an Uber. When I was 16, I got into an advanced summer program. The deposit was due in a week. I asked for help. My dad said I should earn it. And then the next day, he paid for Brianna to fly to Los Angeles for a weekend because she needed content. Little moments, over and over. The pattern wasn't loud. It was consistent. And I adapted the way I always did. I made myself useful. I started doing things I didn't announce. I fixed things before they broke. I learned the details nobody else bothered to learn. By my junior year, I was the only person in the house who knew the logins to anything that mattered. Not because I wanted control, because if I didn't do it, no one would. And then we'd be sitting in the dark acting shocked. My mom's email, my dad's bank portal, the utilities, the security system, the insurance, the online payments. I set up the reminders. I set up the passwords. I kept a private list of everything, updated weekly, saved in a file with a name so boring nobody would ever click it. My mom used to laugh about it with her friends. "She's my little COO," she'd say, hand on my shoulder, smiling like she was bragging about a golden retriever. Then she'd forget I existed the second she turned away. Brianna didn't laugh. Brianna assumed it was my job. "Can you fix my flight check-in?" she'd say, holding her phone out without even looking at me. "Can you email them back and tell them I had an emergency? Can you run my captions through whatever you do so I don't sound mean?" I used to do it. I did it so often it became normal. I didn't even realize how much I'd built until I started imagining the house without me. That thought used to scare me. Not because I thought they would suffer, because I thought I would. In my head, leaving meant disappearing. It meant being nobody. It meant failing. But that morning, on my birthday, with that folded 50 in my wallet and an empty calendar where my party should have been, something changed. Not dramatically, not like a movie. More like I finally admitted a quiet truth I had been avoiding. If I stayed, nothing would ever belong to me. And if I left, the only thing I would lose was a role I never agreed to take. I listened as my parents moved around upstairs, gathering things to take Brianna to whatever healing place they had decided on. I heard the garage door open. I heard my mother call out, voice bright and practiced. "Love you, honey. We'll be back later." Then the front door clicked shut, and the house settled into a silence that felt almost respectful. I stood alone in the kitchen for a long minute, looking at the counter where my birthday card had been. Then I walked to the pantry, reached up to the top shelf, and pulled down a small storage box I kept behind the paper towels. Inside were 3 things: a folded lease agreement, a slim set of keys on a plain ring, and the manila envelope I had never opened. I carried the box to the table, sat down, and let my hands rest on either side of it. Then I opened the envelope. The envelope wasn't from a person. That was the first thing I noticed when I turned it over. No handwriting, no return address that meant anything to me emotionally. Just clean black print and a little barcode sticker, like it belonged to a system, not a family. I slid my finger under the flap and opened it carefully so it didn't tear. Old habit. If something mattered, I kept it intact. Inside was a single page, folded in thirds. A confirmation notice. Storage unit rental. Paid in full through the end of the month. Under it, a second sheet. A lease addendum for my new place. The kind of paperwork you only get after everything is signed, verified, approved. The kind of paperwork that meant there was no more maybe. I let out a slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The keys sitting beside the papers weren't house keys. They were mine. It wasn't a dramatic moment. There was no music in the background, no shaking hands, no crying into my sleeve. It was just me at a kitchen table that had never really belonged to me, holding proof that I had made a decision weeks ago, even if I hadn't fully admitted it to myself. I stacked the papers neatly and put them back in the box. Then I looked around the house. Everything was arranged. Everything was polished. Everything was expensive. And somehow, it all felt temporary, like a showroom where you aren't supposed to touch anything. I stood up, walked to the sink, and washed my mug even though I hadn't used it. Another habit. Clean the evidence, reset the space, keep things smooth. Then I went upstairs. My bedroom door closed with a soft click behind me. The curtains were half open, letting in that pale mid-morning light that makes dust visible. I could see the line on the carpet where my desk chair usually sat. I could see the faint imprint of a picture frame I had taken down months ago and never put back. I opened my closet and looked at what was still there. Not much. Over the last 6 months, I had been moving things out in quiet batches, a box at a time, a tote bag in the trunk, a jacket I donated, a stack of books I lent a friend. It started as a precaution. Something in me always wanted an exit route, even when I told myself I didn't need one. But over time, it became a plan I didn't talk about, even in my own head. I pulled 2 duffel bags from under my bed and set them on the floor. I packed with the same focus I used when I fixed other people's problems. Not rushed, not emotional, just deliberate. Clothes I actually wore. My laptop, my hard drive, my folders from school, the ones I never left in the open because Brianna had a way of misplacing anything that wasn't hers. My diploma and scholarship letters. A small velvet pouch with jewelry my grandmother had given me when I was little. I kept it hidden inside an old pair of running shoes because no one in my family ever looked at anything practical. I walked through my room twice to make sure I wasn't leaving something important behind. Then I went to the hallway linen closet and pulled out the file binder I kept behind the spare towels. The binder wasn't labeled. It didn't need to be. I knew exactly what was inside. Every account, every login, every password reset process, every customer service number, every billing cycle date. I sat down on the edge of my bed with the binder in my lap, opened my laptop, and started working. I didn't change everything out of spite. I changed it because it was mine. It took me less than an hour. My checking account credentials, which my dad had insisted on helping set up when I was 15, even though he never remembered the login. My email, my phone carrier, my credit monitoring portal, my school accounts. Then I moved through the things that were attached to the house: utilities, security system, streaming subscriptions, Wi-Fi. I didn't shut anything off. That would have been dramatic. That would have been a move they could point to and call malicious. I just removed myself from access. I removed my name. I removed my role. As I worked, I kept a running list in a blank document, not because I owed them an explanation, but because I wanted a clean record of what I had done and when. When I was finished, I printed the page. The printer in my dad's office was low on ink, so the text came out slightly faded at the edges. It looked almost polite. I carried the sheet to the kitchen and set it on the counter. Then I looked at it again and added one line at the bottom, in pen, in my own handwriting. I am no longer available. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't a threat. It was just a fact. I placed the house key beside the paper. For a moment, I stood there and listened. No voices, no footsteps, no television. Just the gentle ticking of the wall clock and the faint sound of the pool filter outside. I walked to the front entryway and slipped on my shoes. My hands still didn't shake. That surprised me more than anything. I carried the duffel bags down the stairs, one at a time, and set them by the front door. Then I went to the garage and opened my trunk. The air in the garage smelled like rubber and cleaning spray. My mom kept the garage as spotless as the living room because she hated anything that looked lived in. I loaded my bags quietly, closed the trunk, and sat in the driver's seat for a second with both hands on the steering wheel. I looked straight ahead at the closed garage door. I didn't think about my childhood. I didn't replay old arguments. I didn't imagine what I would say if they tried to stop me. I just did one last mental check, the same way I did before any important task. Keys, wallet, phone, papers, laptop. Then I pressed the button and the garage door lifted. The sunlight outside was brighter than I expected. It made the lawns look almost unreal. Too green, too perfect, like a screensaver. I backed out slowly and pulled onto the street. As I drove away from our neighborhood, I passed the entrance sign with the manicured flowers, the one my mom loved because it looked classic. I had seen that sign thousands of times. This time, I noticed something I had never noticed before. The sign was freshly painted, but the base was cracked. A small detail, easy to miss, easy to ignore. I kept driving. My new place was a studio across town, in an older building with brick hallways and a lobby that smelled faintly like coffee and laundry detergent. No marble, no chandelier, no front room meant for strangers. The elevator creaked a little. The floor number flickered as it climbed. When I stepped out into the hallway, it was quiet. Not tense quiet, just normal quiet. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment was empty except for a folded cleaning cloth on the counter and a single roll of paper towels left by the previous tenant. The air was still, like the room hadn't decided who it belonged to yet. I set my bags down on the floor and stood there for a minute. No one asked me what I was doing. No one told me I was being selfish. No one said, "Hold space" for anybody. I walked to the window and looked out at the street below. People moved in small, ordinary ways. A man carrying groceries, a woman walking a dog, cars stopping at a light. My phone stayed silent in my pocket. I didn't take it out. I just stood in my empty studio, listening to the quiet hum of my own life starting up. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting to be needed. Then I waited. The first day passed without a call. So did the second. I noticed it the way you notice a missing sound. Like when the dishwasher stops and the kitchen feels strangely still. I kept my phone nearby, but I didn't check it every few minutes. I made coffee in my empty kitchen, ate a plain breakfast standing up, and drove to my part-time job like it was any other week. At work, the office smelled like printer paper and stale air conditioning. The routine helped. It kept my mind from wandering into the old reflex, the one that said I should fix whatever was about to break. That reflex didn't disappear overnight. It just got quieter. That evening, I unpacked slowly. I hung my clothes in the small closet. I arranged my folders on the single shelf above the desk. I wiped down the counters, even though they were already clean. I made the space look lived in, not staged. That mattered to me. On day 3, my phone finally rang. It was my dad. I watched it buzz on the table. I didn't pick it up. I didn't decline it either. I let it run its full course until it stopped. A minute later, it rang again. Then again. Still no voicemail. That told me everything. He wasn't calling because he missed me. He was calling because something wasn't working and he didn't know how to make it work without me. On day 4, the first voicemail arrived. It was my mother. Her voice had a strained brightness, like she was trying to sound reasonable on purpose. "Hannah, hi. Call me back when you get this, okay? We need to talk. You can't just disappear like that. Your father is very concerned." Concerned. Not heartbroken. Not worried about my safety. Concerned. I listened once and deleted it. That night, I sat on the floor with my laptop on the coffee table I hadn't bought yet, using a moving box as a chair. I opened my email and checked the accounts I had changed. Everything held. No strange login attempts, no password reset requested alerts, no new devices added. I felt a small sense of confirmation. Not pride, just confirmation. I went to bed early and slept better than I had in months. By day 7, the house I used to run started showing real system failure. It began with Wi-Fi. I got 3 missed calls from my dad in a row, then a short voicemail, clipped and irritated. "Hannah, the internet is down. Call me." No greeting, no question about where I was, just a command. I didn't respond. 2 days later, I got a voicemail from my sister. Her voice was high and sharp, the way it got when she was used to being soothed but wasn't getting what she wanted. "Hannah, what did you do? I'm trying to go live and nothing is working. I have contracts. Do you understand that? You cannot just mess with my work." She wasn't even sure what had happened. She just assumed it had to be me because she couldn't imagine a world where problems existed without a person assigned to fix them. I was done trying to win emotional arguments. I wanted clean documentation. The next week was the first time I heard my dad sound genuinely unsettled. He left a voicemail late at night. I could hear something clinking in the background, like ice in a glass. "Hannah," he said, slower. "We need you to come back and help for a little while. Just temporarily. Things are not running the way they should. Not running the way they should." As if the house had simply malfunctioned. As if the person who had kept it running was a device, not a daughter. That message sat with me longer than the others. I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity. I wasn't just missed. I was required. And now they were learning what I had always known but never said out loud. They didn't know how to manage their own lives. A few days later came the real hit. My father had a dinner with someone important. One of those relationships he called strategic. For years, I had handled his calendar. I had written the confirmations, I had set the alerts, I had even prepared short notes for him about who the person was and what they cared about. Without me, none of it happened. I didn't witness the fallout, but I heard it in his voice when the voicemail arrived the next morning. He didn't sound angry. He sounded panicked. "Hannah, answer the phone. This is not a game. You're being selfish. You don't understand what you're doing to us." Us. Not me, not you, not your family. Just us. Like a unit I existed to support. Then my mother called, and her tone shifted too. She stopped performing patience. When she spoke, it was low and tight, like she was trying not to be overheard. "This house is falling apart," she said, "and you are just sitting there watching it. Come home and fix this." I listened all the way through. Then I set the phone down on the counter. I didn't respond. Silence, for me, wasn't avoidance anymore. It was an action. Step 1. Do nothing I can't defend later. Step 2. Save every message. Step 3. Keep my life stable and separate. That was the shift. The moment where my mind stopped asking, "How do I make this better?" and started asking, "What is the safest, cleanest path forward?" Because what I was seeing wasn't heartbreak. It was withdrawal. They weren't grieving me. They were grieving the loss of the infrastructure I provided. That night, I sat on my mattress, which was still on the floor, and opened my laptop. I logged into the credit monitoring service I had kept active since I was 16, mostly because my high school counselor once told us it was smart. I hadn't checked it in a few weeks. There had never been anything to see. I expected the same empty dashboard. Instead, I saw a notification banner at the top of the screen. New account activity detected. I stared at it for a long moment, not blinking. Then I clicked. The credit monitoring page loaded slowly, like it was trying to be polite about what it was about to show me. 4 new accounts. 3 credit cards with high limits. 1 personal loan. All opened after I moved out. I clicked into the details and felt my focus narrow. Dates, lenders, balances, a timeline that didn't leave room for interpretation. The total was just under $300,000. I read it twice. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I needed to be certain I was seeing it correctly. Then I opened the transaction history. It wasn't random spending. It was a pattern. Hotels, flights, boutique charges, car payments, the kind of purchases that matched the life my sister posted online. It was all there, itemized and unemotional, the way systems tell the truth. I sat in my studio with the laptop open on the counter and let the quiet settle again. No shaking hands, no racing heart. Just a very clear understanding of what this was. This wasn't family drama anymore. This wasn't favoritism. This wasn't my mother being thoughtless or my father being weak. This was identity theft. And the strange part was how quickly my mind accepted that. I think part of me had been preparing for a moment like this my whole life. Not the specific crime, but the idea that they would eventually cross a line that couldn't be smoothed over with effort. I closed the transaction page and opened a fresh document. Step 1. Lock my credit. Step 2. Preserve evidence. Step 3. Get professional help. I didn't call my parents. I didn't call my sister. I didn't ask why. I put the phone face down, then picked it back up and made 2 calls. The first was to the credit bureaus to place freezes. I followed the prompts, wrote down confirmation numbers, and saved screenshots of every completed action. The second was to a law office I had researched months earlier, back when leaving still felt like a possibility instead of a fact. A woman named Marisol answered and booked me for a consult the next day. Her voice was calm, almost routine, like she'd heard this story in a dozen different versions. That night, I pulled everything I could. My full credit report, the account opening dates, every address tied to the accounts, any digital signature records available, the alerts from my monitoring portal, screenshots of my move-in date and my first utility bill at my new place. I also pulled my old file, the one with the household systems I used to manage. Not because it proved they did it, but because it proved something else. It proved they had access. It proved the timing. It proved that the moment my labor disappeared, they found another way to extract value. The next day, I sat in Marisol's office, a small space with neutral art and a glass of water already waiting on the table. She didn't ask me how it made me feel. Not first. She asked, "When did you move out?" I told her. She asked, "When were the accounts opened?" I showed her. She asked, "Do you have any proof you did not authorize this?" I slid my folder across the table. "All of it is here." She scanned the documents without changing expression. Then she nodded once. "Okay," she said. "We treat this like fraud. Because it is fraud." That was the moment something in me settled even more. Not because it was comforting, but because it was clear. Over the next 2 weeks, we worked like it was a project. We requested full account applications from the lenders. We gathered IP logs where possible. We pulled delivery confirmations for cards mailed to the house. We matched transactions to dates and locations that overlapped with my sister's posts and my parents' spending. Everything stayed factual. Everything stayed clean. Marisol told me, do not warn them. Do not threaten them. Let the process speak. So we did. We filed. Civil complaint. Identity theft. Fraud. Damages. A process server delivered it to the house on a Tuesday morning. I wasn't there, but I pictured the moment with surprising accuracy. My father opening the door. His polite confusion. The paper in his hands. The sudden realization that the version of me they kept in their heads no longer existed. The calls started the same day. My mother first. Crying, then pleading. "Hannah, this is extreme," she said in a voicemail. "This is family. We were just borrowing it. We were going to pay it back." No apology, no acknowledgement, just justification. My father next. His voice tight, controlled, trying to sound authoritative. "You're destroying us," he said. "Fix this. Withdraw it. We can handle this privately." Then Brianna, in a burst of messages that didn't even try to hide the entitlement. "You cannot do this to us. Do you know what this will do to my career? Mom is sick. Dad is freaking out. Call me right now." I saved everything. Not to punish them, to document them. A week later, Marisol called me and said, "They've asked for a meeting." I said, "No." She didn't argue. She just said, "Good. If they show up, do not engage emotionally. Keep it simple. Keep it bounded." 2 days after that, my building intercom buzzed while I was making tea. The sound was small, but it cut through the room. I walked to the panel and pressed the button. "Yes?" The doorman's voice came through. "Hannah, your parents are downstairs. They're asking to come up." I looked at the wall for a second, not because I was afraid, but because I was deciding the most controlled way to handle it. If I refused, they would create a scene in the lobby. That would become another mess for someone else to manage. If I let them up, it would be on my terms, in my space, with my boundaries. I pressed the button again. "Send them up," I said. Then I set my mug down in the sink, turned off the stove, and sat on the chair by the window. I didn't rehearse what to say. I didn't need speeches. Everything that mattered was already on paper. The elevator in the hallway made a soft mechanical sound as it climbed. Then it went quiet, and I waited for the doors to open. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and my parents stepped into the hallway like they weren't sure they belonged there. My mother went first, clutching her purse tight against her side. My father followed, shoulders tense, his eyes fixed straight ahead. They both looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, exactly. More like their usual certainty had drained out of them. When they reached my door, my father knocked once, then again, too quickly, like he wanted the moment over. I opened the door and stood back without saying anything. They walked in slowly. My studio wasn't impressive in the way our old house was impressive. It was clean, quiet, and plainly mine. A small table by the window, 2 chairs, a simple rug, boxes still stacked neatly against one wall because I hadn't rushed to fill the space with proof. My mother's eyes moved around the room, taking inventory. My father looked at the floor, then at me, then away again. "Hannah," my mother said first. Her voice tried for warmth and landed somewhere near panic. "We've been worried sick." I nodded once, not agreeing, just acknowledging the sound. My father cleared his throat. "We need to talk." "There's a chair," I said, and gestured to the table. They sat. I stayed standing for a moment, then sat across from them, hands folded loosely in front of me. No one spoke for a few seconds. In those few seconds, I noticed details I wouldn't have noticed before. My father's suit jacket had a faint crease, like he'd slept in it. My mother's mascara was smudged under one eye. Her perfume was stronger than usual, as if she had sprayed too much, hoping it would restore normalcy. My father finally said, "This lawsuit is insane." I looked at him. "It's accurate." My mother's face tightened. "Sweetheart, you don't understand what you're doing. This is going to destroy the family. I kept my voice level. I didn't open accounts in my name. My father leaned forward slightly, palms on his knees, and tried a different tone, the one he used with employees. We were borrowing. Your sister had a temporary issue. We were going to pay it back. I didn't argue that point. I didn't need to. I reached to the side and pulled a thin folder off the counter. I had set it there earlier, not as a threat, just as structure. I slid it across the table toward them. Inside were copies, account openings, dates, balances, address confirmations, transaction summaries. My mother flipped through the pages quickly, as if speed could change what was on them. My father stared longer, jaw clenched. Then my mother set the folder down and started crying, quietly at first, then louder, like she wanted the sound to do the persuading. "Hannah, please," she said, voice breaking. "We raised you. We did everything for you. How can you do this to us?" There it was, clean and familiar. Not an apology. A bill. My father spoke again, lower. "If you don't drop it, I could go to jail." I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. "You will sign a written confession," I continued, "acknowledging that you opened these accounts without my authorization, so my credit report can be corrected." My mother's mouth opened, then closed again. "And you will sign a no-contact agreement," I said. "You don't call me. You don't message me. You don't show up here. You don't send people. If you violate it, the settlement is void." My mother shook her head, tears spilling. "Where are we supposed to go?" I kept my voice even. "That's not my problem." "What about Brianna?" she asked, as if saying my sister's name might trigger my old conditioning. "That's also not my problem." My father stared at the folder again, then at the wall behind me, then back to the folder. He was doing the math. Not emotional math, practical math. He knew what a public lawsuit did to his reputation. He knew what lenders did when they saw a fraud complaint. He knew what investors did when instability entered the story. He also knew, finally, that I wasn't going to fold. My mother wiped her face with the back of her hand and looked at me the way she used to look at me when she wanted something fixed, waiting for me to soften. I didn't. After a long silence, my father said quietly, "If we agree, you won't pursue criminal charges." "Not if you follow the agreement," I said, "and not if the debt is paid and my credit is repaired." My mother let out a sound that was half sob, half disbelief. My father's shoulders sagged. "Okay," he said. "Okay. We'll do it." I didn't nod like it was a victory. I just nodded like a transaction had been decided. "Marisol will send the documents," I said. "You'll sign through her." My mother leaned forward suddenly, voice shaking. "Hannah, please, don't do this. We're your parents." I looked at her, and my voice stayed calm. "You didn't treat me like your daughter," I said. "You treated me like staff." My father stood up as if sitting had become unbearable. My mother followed, still crying. At the door, my mother turned back, her hand on the frame like she wanted one last connection. "I don't know who you are," she whispered. I answered honestly, without heat. "I'm the person who handles things," I said. "I'm just not handling yours anymore." They left. The door clicked shut behind them, and my apartment went quiet again. I stood still for a moment, listening to the absence of them. Then I walked to the sink and rinsed out my mug, the small domestic motion grounding me back into the present. Over the next few months, the consequences unfolded the way paperwork unfolds. Slowly, then all at once. Their house went on the market. The cars were sold. The accounts in my name were paid down to zero. Marisol sent me copies of the signed confession and the settlement agreement. The language was cold and formal, which I appreciated. It didn't pretend anything. The credit bureaus updated my file in stages. First, the disputes, then the removals, then the score climb, point by point, back toward normal. I didn't celebrate. I just watched the numbers return to where they should have been. One afternoon, about 6 months after they came to my apartment, I drove through our old neighborhood without meaning to. I had a meeting across town, and the traffic rerouted me. I turned onto the familiar street and saw the house from a distance. There was a sold sign planted in the front lawn, angled slightly, like it had been put there in a hurry. A moving truck sat in the driveway. 2 people carried boxes down the front steps. My father and my mother, moving without their usual performance. Brianna was sitting on the curb, staring at her phone, shoulders hunched, as if a screen might offer her a new reality if she refreshed enough times. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down much either. I just kept driving, hands steady on the wheel, eyes forward. Not because I was punishing them, because I was done being part of it. And when I reached my own apartment later, I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and felt the quiet settle around me like a clean sheet. I set my keys on the counter and stood there for a moment, letting the stillness hold. Then I made tea and opened my laptop and checked one last time that my credit report still showed a zero balance across every account. It did. I put the phone face down, and I let the day end. A year passed in a way I didn't expect. Not fast exactly, just steady. When people talk about cutting off family, they often describe it like a single event, one sharp moment and then a clean silence after. For me, it was quieter than that. It was a series of ordinary days where nothing bad happened because I wasn't in the middle of someone else's emergency. The first few months, I kept waiting for the familiar pull, the guilt, the urge to check in, the reflex to fix. It showed up sometimes, usually late at night when the apartment was dark and my mind started inventorying old responsibilities out of habit. But each time it did, I would bring myself back to something simple and real. I would wash the dishes. I would fold laundry. I would take out the trash. I would set my coffee mug in the same spot on the counter. Small routines, repeated, until my body started believing what my brain already knew. I was safe. I also learned that peace isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It shows up in the absence of tension. It shows up when you realize you're not bracing for a phone call. It shows up when you open your email and there isn't a crisis waiting. In that year, my life became boring in the best way. I finished my first year of college without anyone asking me to rewrite an email or solve a problem they created. I got promoted at my job because my work was consistent, not because I was rescuing anyone. I started saving again, not for emergencies, but for plans. I bought a real table, a decent couch, a set of plates that matched, not because anyone would see them, but because I wanted my home to feel cared for. Sometimes friends would come over and say, "It's so calm in here." And I would smile and say, "Yeah, I like it that way." I didn't hear from my parents, not once. The no-contact agreement held, which told me something important. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were staying away because the rules mattered more to them than the relationship ever did. That realization didn't hurt the way it would have years earlier. It just clarified things. On a quiet Saturday morning, I was cleaning out a drawer in my desk, the one where I kept old paperwork. I found the faded printout I had left on the kitchen counter the day I moved out, the list of passwords I had changed, and the line I'd written at the bottom. I am no longer available. I held it for a moment, then folded it once and set it back in the drawer, not as a trophy, just as a record. Then I made tea and sat by the window. Outside, the city moved the way it always did. Cars stopping at lights, someone walking a dog, a delivery person carrying a stack of boxes into the building. Nothing dramatic, just life. And that was the point. Every so often, I would hear something small through old connections. A former neighbor mentioning my parents had moved into a rental. Someone saying Brianna was taking a break from social media. A vague comment about my father's business changing hands. I didn't chase details. I didn't need them. The truth had already been revealed through the only thing that matters when emotions get tangled. Documents, numbers, timelines, signatures. That's what set me free. And once you're free, you don't spend your time staring back at the cage. What stayed with me, though, was something else. Not the money, not the lawsuit, not even the house being sold. It was the way it happened so quietly at the beginning. The way a family can train one person to be the load-bearing wall and then act shocked when the roof collapses without them. After everything settled, a friend from high school reached out and asked if we could talk. We hadn't spoken in years, not closely, but she sounded careful in her message, like she was choosing each word. We met for coffee on a weekday afternoon, and she sat across from me with her hands wrapped around the cup, not drinking. She told me her parents had started opening mail addressed to her. She told me they kept handling her financial aid forms. She told me she had a feeling something was off, but she didn't know how to prove it without turning her whole life into a fight. I didn't give her an emotional speech. I just told her what to do first. Freeze your credit, pull your reports, save your messages, keep records. Step by step, the way I learned. That conversation reminded me of something I didn't fully see when I was in it. There are a lot of people quietly carrying families that will never admit they're being carried. And if you're one of them, you don't need a perfect moment to leave. You just need a clear plan and the willingness to protect your name. Now, if you made it all the way to the end with me, thank you for sitting with this story. If you liked this kind of calm, real-life storytelling, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow in a steady way. And drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I read those, and I love seeing where everyone is listening from. 2 popular stories are coming up next, so stay close, and I'll see you in the next one.